It began on one of those evenings when silence felt heavier than words and trust seemed like the only way to breathe. Nora sat across from me at the kitchen table, her bare feet tucked under her, her wine glass cradled in both hands. The lamp above us cast a honey-colored glow, softening the sharp edges of the day. We had done this 100 times before, shared bottles of red, talked until the city outside fell quiet, confessed things we couldn't tell anyone else. Our friendship had always lived in these hours, in the in-between of laughter and tears, when the world felt too heavy to carry alone. That night, though, felt different. My thoughts were restless, my chest tight with something unspoken. Nora noticed. She always did. She tilted her head, her dark hair falling to one side, and gave me the look I knew too well. It wasn't a demand. It was an invitation. So I spoke. Slowly at first, stumbling, tasting the weight of every word before letting it go. I told her about the exhaustion of pretending, about the way my family's expectations pressed against me like invisible walls, about the secret I had never admitted, that I wasn't sure I wanted the life they had already chosen for me. Marriage, children, stability. I wanted something else, something I couldn't yet name without fear of their disappointment. My voice shook, but Nora reached across the table, her hand brushing mine with a kind of patience that always made me braver. "Selene," she said softly, her tone threaded with certainty, "you don't have to carry that alone. You never did. You have me." I felt the sting of tears, not from sadness, but relief. With her, secrets felt lighter. With her, I'll believe that maybe being understood was enough. She poured us another glass, her laughter easy when I admitted how afraid I was, how tired of pretending. She didn't judge. She never did. That was why I trusted her more than anyone, why I let myself lean into her presence, safe in the glow of that moment. The hours slipped by unnoticed. The candle we'd lit burned low, puddling into wax. Outside, the streets softened under the hush of midnight, cars growing sparse, the city folding into sleep. By the time Nora rose to leave, pulling me into a hug that lasted longer than usual, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Lightness. I closed the door behind her, leaning against the wood with a faint smile. I had handed her a piece of myself I had never shown anyone else, and for the first time in a long time, I believed it was safe. I didn't know then how quickly trust could turn, or how easily the words I gave to her would find their way into the mouths of others. Sunday dinner at my parents' place has a rhythm that never changes. My mother sets the table with the same faded linen. My father pretends not to hover by the oven. And the doorbell chimes exactly once before my sister lets herself in without knocking. Familiarity is the choreography of our family. It keeps conversations safe, predictable, rehearsed. I arrived with a dessert and the promise to tell them everything soon, the way I had for years. It was easier than admitting the truth, that I didn't know how to translate my life into the language they understood. The living room smelled of roasted rosemary and lemon. The old clock in the hallway sighed every minute like it, too, was tired of keeping time. At first, it was the usual small talk, work, weather, whether I'd seen the neighbor's new dog. We moved to the table, and for a while, I let myself believe the evening would pass in the safety of habit. "Selene," my mother said, passing me the salad tongs with that exaggerated casualness she reserves for important announcements, "you know you don't have to rush anything. We're not expecting a timeline." The words slid over the tablecloth like a card placed face down. My sister glanced up, then away. My father reached for the salt he never uses. Something had shifted. Slight but undeniable. "I'm not rushing," I said carefully. "I'm fine." "Of course," she answered too quickly. "We just don't want you to feel pressured. About milestones. About settling." She cleared her throat. "It's perfectly respectable to build a life that looks different." My fork paused. Respectable? Different? Words that had never once belonged to my family's vocabulary about me. Did something happen? "No, darling," she said, light as air. "We were only talking last week about how independent you've always been, how sometimes the bravest thing a young woman can do is say, 'This isn't for me.'" She lifted her glass. "You don't owe anyone the version of yourself that hurts to carry." The sentence landed with a weight it shouldn't have had unless someone had put it there for her. I had said that exact phrase 2 nights ago, to Nora, and to Nora alone. I felt the room tilt. "Who told you that?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "Told us what?" my sister said too brightly. She poured more wine into my glass without asking, a peace offering disguised as hospitality. "The part about the version that hurts to carry. That's specific." My mother blanked, then picked an invisible crumb from the table. "Oh, Selene, we talk. Families talk. We just want you happy." Happy. Another heavy word set down like fine china. My father finally spoke, eyes fixed on his plate. "We know you've been considering different paths. No one is going to force you into anything. If grad school makes more sense than other things, that's fine." Grad school. A decoy destination I'd once floated to Nora as a way to buy time. The room contracted to a pinpoint. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I excused myself to the hallway and leaned against the cool plaster, breathing in until my pulse stopped rattling my ribs. No new messages. A photo from Nora, us laughing, a small red heart, stung. Back at the table, the script resumed. My mother asked whether I'd need help with boxes if I decided to move closer to campus. My sister offered her couch for transitions. Each kindness felt preloaded, as if rehearsed. I watched their mouths shape hair into sentences, and all I could hear was my own voice in my kitchen, placed carefully into Nora's hands. I'd given her language, and somehow it had traveled here. On the way out, my mother hugged me too long. She whispered, "We'll support you no matter what." My father pressed containers into my hands. My sister squeezed my shoulder. I smiled, because that is what good daughters do when everyone believes they are being gentle. Outside, the night air was cool and clean. I stood by my car and called Nora. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey you, how was the gauntlet?" I swallowed. "Did you talk to my mother?" A soft hitch. Then, "I might have mentioned you were overwhelmed. I didn't say anything specific, I promise." The word promise hurt. "They quoted me, Nora, my exact words." Silence pressed against my ear. Finally, she exhaled. "I thought if I helped them understand, they'd stop pushing. I thought it would protect you." Protect me. I closed my eyes, steadying myself against the car door. Trust doesn't shatter with a crash. It thins until it tears. The drive home blurred into one long stretch of headlights and shadows. I barely noticed the traffic lights or the way the rain-slicked streets reflected the neon signs. My mind kept circling the dinner table, my mother's words replaying with surgical precision. "You don't owe anyone the version of yourself that hurts to carry." My words. Mine, but spoken in her voice. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. The trail doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, sliding under your skin until every memory feels rewritten. Back in my apartment, the quiet felt heavier than usual. The walls seemed to listen, waiting for me to say something, but I had no words. I placed my phone face down on the counter, only to snatch it back a moment later, as if ignoring it would make the screen explode with the explanation I craved. Nothing. Just the familiar wallpaper. A photo of Nora and me at the seaside 2 summers ago, wind in our hair, joy unfiltered. I pressed the call button before I could second-guess myself. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Selene," she said, her voice carefully steady. "Are you home?" "Yes," I said, my tone sharper than I intended. "I need you to tell me the truth. Did you think I wouldn't notice?" There was a pause. Then a sigh. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought if they understood, maybe they'd stop pressing you. You always hate the questions, the pressure. I wanted to protect you." Protect? The word cut deeper than silence. You don't protect someone by stealing their voice and handing it to others. "I didn't steal anything," she argued softly. "I shared because I thought it would help. They love you, Selene. They just don't know how to show it." Her reasoning was neat, practiced, and it terrified me because it almost sounded right. But beneath it was something jagged, a truth I couldn't ignore. Once given away, trust cannot be reclaimed whole. I walked to the window, city lights trembling in the glass. "You should have asked me first. You should have given me the choice." Her silence answered louder than words. "Please," Nora whispered at last, "don't let this ruin us. We've survived worse, haven't we?" My throat tightened. Memories flooded in, nights of laughter, shared heartbreaks, secrets exchanged like currency. She had been my anchor when everything else shifted. And here I was, adrift because she had let go first. "I don't know," I said quietly. "I don't know if we can survive this." When the call ended, the apartment was silent again, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint tick of the clock. I sat on the couch, hugging a pillow to my chest, and let the weight of disappointment settle over me. It wasn't just about the words she repeated, it was about the crack in something I thought unbreakable. The next morning, I woke to sunlight pressing against my blinds, too bright for the weight in my chest. I hadn't slept much. My dreams had been full of voices that weren't mine, words passed around like gossip at a market stall. By the time I pulled on a sweater and tied my hair back, I already knew I couldn't stay cocooned in the apartment all day. Nora texted me first. "Coffee? Please, let me explain in person." The message sat on my screen like an ultimatum. I could ignore it and let the silence stretch into something final, or I could go and risk hearing her excuse carved into something I could never unhear. Against my better judgment, I typed back, 1 hour, same place. The cafe was half empty, morning light slanting through tall windows, turning the steam from the espresso machine into faint ribbons of gold. I chose a table by the corner, away from the door, needing a few extra seconds to prepare myself when she walked in. She arrived 10 minutes late, hair loose around her shoulders, eyes searching for me the moment she stepped inside. When she spotted me, she smiled, tentative, almost childlike, and hurried over. "Selene," she began, sliding into the chair opposite me, "thank you for coming." I studied her face. This was the same woman who had once stayed up with me all night after my first heartbreak, who had brought me soup when I was sick, who had stood beside me in countless photographs that proved our lives were stitched together. And yet now, there was a seam torn open between us. "Talk," I said simply. She wrapped her hands around her cup when the waitress set it down, as if needing the warmth to steady herself. I didn't betray you. I swear I didn't. I repeated something you said because I thought they needed to hear it. They've been suffocating you, Selene, always asking, always pushing. I thought if they heard your pain in your own words, maybe they'd stop. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Do you hear yourself? You took what I trusted you with, what I gave you because you were safe, and you delivered it like a speech at the dinner table. Do you realize how humiliating that is? Her eyes filled with tears as she whispered, "You're my best friend. Please don't say we're done." The cafe bustled quietly around us, baristas calling names, spoons clinking against cups, but our corner was a bubble of fragile tension. I stared at her, torn between anger and grief, and realized both emotions were born from the same place, love, the kind that hurts when it bends. I wanted to forgive her. I wanted to walk away. I didn't know which urge would win.
The cafe air had grown heavy, the kind of weight that no open window could shift. I stirred my untouched coffee, the spoon clinking in slow, deliberate circles, just to keep my hands from trembling. Nora sat across from me, wiping her cheeks with a napkin that tore at the corners. Every time she reached for words, I cut them down with silence. Finally, I pushed back my chair. "I need air," I said, though really, I needed distance. I stepped outside, the city morning sharp against my skin. Cars hissed along the wet pavement, and a group of students laughed as they passed by, their carefree joy slicing against the ache in my chest. I thought I was alone for a moment, free of her eyes, free of the weight of disappointment. But then I heard it. "Selene?" The voice came from my left. I turned and froze. It was Mara, my cousin, the one who always managed to know too much, the one who thrived on whispers. She smiled with thin surprise, clutching a paper bag of croissants. "I didn't know you'd be here." Her gaze flicked over my shoulder, where Nora still sat by the window, pale and crumpled, and then Mara tilted her head. "It's true, then?" she asked, voice lowered but edged with glee. "What you said about not wanting the life they planned for you, about needing something else?" The ground seemed to tilt beneath me. My mother knowing was one thing, but Mara? If Mara knew, then the words had already spread further than I dared imagine. I forced a smile. "You shouldn't believe everything you hear." "Oh, I don't," she said, grin widening. "But it's fascinating. I always thought you'd be the one to break tradition." I walked away before she could say more, my pulse hammering in my throat. When I re-entered the cafe, Nora looked up at me with a kind of desperate hope. "Selene, please." "Don't," I cut her off, voice shaking. "It's not just my parents, Nora. Mara knows. Who else? Who else did you give me to?" She flinched, eyes wide. "I swear, I didn't tell her. I only spoke to your mom." "My mom is enough," I snapped, louder than I meant to. Heads turned. I lowered my voice. "You don't understand. In this family, secrets aren't secrets. They're currency. And now I'm broke." Nora's face crumpled. "I was trying to make it easier for you." "Easier?" My laugh was bitter. "You've made me a story for them to dissect. You've made my fears a dinner topic." The waitress brought over the check, her glance hovering a little too long, as if she could taste the tension in the air. I pulled a bill from my wallet and dropped it on the tray, not caring if it covered both our drinks. Nora reached for my wrist. "Selene, don't walk away from me." I looked down at her hand, then at the years we had shared. All those nights of comfort, of laughter, of promises whispered in confidence. And yet, standing there, I felt as though we were already strangers. I slipped my hand free. "Maybe you should think about why you're so afraid of being left. Because right now, I can't think of a reason to stay." Her eyes shimmered with tears, but I didn't wait for her reply. I pushed through the door into the street where the noise of the city swallowed my racing thoughts. The rest of the day unfolded like a dream I couldn't wake from.
every sound seemed louder than it should be. The shrill buzz of my phone, the impatient honk of a taxi, the rustle of neighbors' footsteps in the hallway. All of it gnawed at the silence that Nora had left inside me. By evening, I knew I couldn't avoid my family. Not after Mara. If she knew, then the echo of my confession was already rippling outward. Sure enough, the call came just after sunset. "Selene?" my mother's voice said over the line, syrupy sweet in a way that made my stomach clench. "We've been talking, and we think it might be good to have a family dinner again this weekend. Just the close ones. No pressure, of course." No pressure. The phrase throbbed like a bruise. "I'll think about it," I answered, my tone clipped. That Saturday, I walked into their house with a practiced smile. My sister was already there, perched on the couch with Mara, both of them laughing at something on a phone screen. The laughter stopped when they saw me, replaced by the kind of too bright greetings that felt like stage lights in my eyes. Dinner smelled of roasted garlic and thyme. My father poured me wine before I sat down, a gesture that was almost ceremonial. For a few minutes, conversation hovered safely above the surface: work, the weather, the price of groceries. But beneath it, I could feel the current tugging at me, waiting to pull me under. Finally, Mara leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "Selene, it's actually refreshing, you being honest about what you want." My fork clattered against the plate. "Excuse me?" She smirked. "I'm just saying, not everyone has the courage to admit they don't want the perfect little picture. Husband, kids, white fence, all that. You said it best yourself." I stared at her, pulse pounding. "When exactly did I say that, Mara?" She tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Oh, I don't know. Word gets around." My sister chimed in, hesitant. "She's right, Selene. Mom told me you opened up. Honestly, I'm proud of you." Proud. The word twisted like a knife. What they called pride, I felt as exposure. I set down my glass. This isn't some brave announcement. It was a private conversation. With Nora. My mother's fork paused halfway to her mouth. The room went still. "I didn't mean," she began, but I cut her off. "I didn't give you permission to dissect me like this, to pass around my thoughts like dessert." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the clock ticking in the hall. My father finally spoke, his tone careful. "Selene, maybe this is what you needed. Maybe saying it out loud to more than just Nora gives you freedom." Freedom. The word felt like chains. I pushed back from the table, the food untouched, my pulse louder than the clock tick. Outside, the night was cool, the air smelling faintly of jasmine from my mother's garden. I breathed it in like oxygen I had been denied all evening. Walking to my car, I realized the betrayal wasn't just Nora's anymore. It was woven into every look, every too careful word my family had offered. And the one place I had once felt safe between friendship and family now felt like enemy territory. When I finally pulled into the lot beneath my building, the city had quieted into the kind of hush that makes every small sound feel amplified. The tick of cooling engines, the soft thud of a car door far away, the whisper of leaves shaking off the day's heat. I sat there a moment, with my hands still on the wheel, watching the stairwell window glow like a tired eye. Then I cut the engine and let the silence settle. Nora was sitting on the floor outside my apartment when I reached the landing. Her back rested against the wall, knees drawn close. A paper bag by her side with a bouquet of tulips peeking out, rubber band tight around their green wrists. She looked up too fast, hope tripping over apology in her face. I know I shouldn't be here, she said, pushing to her feet, but I couldn't sleep. I couldn't let it end like that. It hasn't ended, I answered, slipping the key into the lock, but it's not what it was. For a heartbeat, I considered closing the door behind me. Instead, I stepped in and left it open. She followed slowly, as if stepping into a room where a fragile instrument was still ringing. The apartment smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and the jasmine candle I'd blown out that morning. I put my bag on the counter, she set hers beside it, and began unpacking. Tea, dark chocolate, the tulips, a clumsy math of offerings. I didn't touch any of it. I didn't mean to betray you, she said, voice low and even, as if practicing steadiness could carry the words. I thought if they heard your fear in your own language, they'd stop pressing. I thought I was protecting you. You don't protect me by stripping away my choice, I said. Each word landed with the weight of a door shutting. Her eyes shone. Then tell me how to start making this right. I'll do it. You can't fix it, I said, softer. But you can own it. Call my mother. Tell her you overstepped. Tell her those words were private, not community property. If Mara knows anything, call her too. And after that, I inhaled, the breath snagging in my chest. After that, give me space to decide what I say and to whom. She nodded quickly, the motion almost childlike. I will, I promise. I filled a kettle because my hands needed a job. The click of the switch rang out like a tiny verdict. Nora watched me the way people watch surgeons, helpless, hopeful, terrified to interrupt. Do you want me out of your life? She asked, finally. The question wobbled, and then steadied, like a glass set down too hard. I pressed my palms into the edge of the counter. Images threaded through me. Her hand at the small of my back the night I thought I'd fall apart. The years of shared birthdays and bad haircuts. Our thrift store dresses on a rooftop under cheap fairy lights. Love doesn't evaporate because trust cracks. But the crack changes the floor you're standing on. I want you in my life, I said, but not like this. I need boundaries that count even when they're inconvenient. I need you to sit with my silence without translating it for an audience. She swallowed. I can do that. Please let me prove it. Proof takes time and distance. The kettle began to murmur. I took the tulips to the sink, slid the rubber band free, watched the stems relax into the glass. The sight made my throat tighten. Even flowers brace when held too tightly. Her phone buzzed against the counter. She flinched. Your aunt, she said, after a glance. She's asking if the grad school plan is official. The phrase hit like a bruise I'd forgotten. That was a decoy, a way to buy time. I told you once in code. Now it's headline text. She locked the screen, as if darkness could unring a bell. I'll fix it. You can't, I answered. Not unkindly. Gossip has its own weather pattern. The best we can do is stop feeding it and wait it out. Steam plumed. We made tea and carried the cups to the couch, sitting at opposite ends with knees nearly touching. Two people measuring the distance between apology and acceptance. The lamplight pooled gold around us, the rest of the room in soft shadow. I've been afraid of losing you for years, Nora said. Maybe that's why I keep grabbing the wrong things. Don't grab, stay. She breathed out, something loosening in her shoulders. I'll call your mom now. I won't frame it. I'll say exactly what I did and that it wasn't mine to share. Thank you, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. She stepped into the hallway to make the call. I rinsed her cups, wiped a clean circle on the counter that didn't need wiping, trimmed the tulips and set them by the window. City air moved through the room when I cracked the sash. The flowers leaned instinctively toward it. Nora's phone were back, with her phone at her side, eyes rimmed pink but clearer. She cried, she said simply. She said she didn't realize she'd turned you into inventory. She wants to hear it from you when you're ready. no deadlines. In my chest, something unclenched by degrees. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the first loosened stitch. "Okay," I said. She nodded. We stood there in the half-quiet, listening to the building settle, to a neighbor's laughter drift and fade. Finally, she reached for the door. "I'll give you that space. But I'm not leaving the friendship. I'll be here, just farther back." "That's the point," I said. After she left, the apartment exhaled. I opened the window wider. Night unrolled across the sill. The flowers bent into the draft, unafraid. I watched them a long time, until the tinny ache behind my ribs eased, and the room felt like mine again, not because it was empty, but because my voice had somewhere to live. The next morning, sunlight spilled through my blinds in a way that felt almost defiant, as if the world refused to pause just because my trust had cracked open. I lay there, listening to the hum of the city, a delivery truck backing up, a neighbor's radio, the faint hiss of a shower through the wall, and wondered how many of those people had secrets that weren't safe with the wrong ears. My phone sat on the nightstand, blinking with unread messages. I ignored them until the kettle boiled, until the tea was steeped and the kitchen smelled of chamomile and lemon. Then I scrolled. 3 from Mara, cheerful and intrusive. 2 from my mother, one asking when we could talk, the other a gentle reminder about Sunday dinner, and 1 from Nora. "I called your mom. I told her the truth. Call me when you're ready." I stared at the screen so long it dimmed, then tapped it awake again, like maybe the words would change. They didn't. By noon, I had convinced myself to step outside. The air was crisp, touched with early spring, the kind of weather that makes strangers smile at one another on the street. I walked without aim, my boots tapping a rhythm against the pavement, until I found myself outside the bookstore Nora and I used to haunt. The window display was new, bright covers arranged like confetti, but inside, it smelled the same. Paper, ink, dust, the faint sweetness of brewed coffee drifting from the cafe corner. I picked up a book I had no intention of buying and thumbed through it more for the comfort of the motion than for the words. That's when I heard her voice. "Selene." I turned. Nora stood near the entrance, coat half-buttoned, tulips in her hand again. It was almost comical, as if she thought flowers could rewrite time. "I didn't plan to find you here," she said, breathless. "But maybe it's better this way, neutral ground." I closed the book. "What do you want, Nora?" Her throat worked as she searched for words. "I want us not to end. I know I broke something, but I don't want it to be permanent. I told your mom everything. No excuses, no dressing it up." She cried, Selene. She said she never realized she'd made you feel like a ledger item. She wants to talk to you when you're ready. The ache inside me shifted. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something, a small hinge creaking open. "Why now?" I asked. "Why all this urgency?" "Because I've spent too many years taking your presence for granted. I thought you'd always be there. And when I saw you pull away, I panicked. I tried to hold you by telling them, thinking it would make your burden lighter. But I see now, I just made it heavier." We stood between shelves of fiction, titles staring at us like patient witnesses. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to unhook the weight from my ribs. But belief takes more than words in a bookstore. Trust doesn't return with tulips. It comes back inch by inch, if it comes back at all. Nora nodded, lips pressed tight. "Then let me earn each inch." A man brushed past us, muttering an apology as he reached for a novel on the display. The ordinary moment broke the tension enough for me to breathe. "Let's start with coffee," I said. "1 cup. That's all I can give today." Relief softened her shoulders. 1 cup is enough. We walked to the cafe corner,
ordered drinks we didn't taste, and sat across from one another at a table worn smooth by years of conversations just like this. My hands curled around the mug, warm but trembling. I can't promise the same friendship we had, but maybe something new can grow if we both stop trying to control it. Nora's eyes brightened, cautious but hopeful. Something new, she repeated. And for the first time since my kitchen, I felt the possibility of that truth. Not certainty, not yet, but possibility, glowing like light through the cracks.
The coffee cooled between us faster than the words we managed to exchange. For long minutes, the clink of spoons and the hiss of the espresso machine filled the gaps. Every time I thought I had the courage to speak, I caught Nora's eyes, wide, pleading, stubborn, and the words would scatter like startled birds. "I keep thinking," she said at last, "that if I could go back to the exact moment before I spoke, I'd shut my mouth. I'd hold the secret like a stone in my pocket, heavy but mine to carry." "You can't undo what's said," I replied softly. "That's the cruelty of language. Once it's out, it can't be taken back, only dealt with." Her gaze fell to the tulips lying on the table. "Then let me deal with it. Let me carry it differently this time. If it means being silent, I can do that. If it means standing behind you instead of next to you, I can do that too." I sipped the bitter coffee, feeling its edge bite my tongue. "It means learning that not every silence needs to be filled. Some things exist because they are unspoken. They're not voids, they're boundaries." The hum of voices around us faded as I spoke. For a strange second, I felt like the entire cafe leaned in to listen. Nora's expression wavered between hope, regret, and something like awe. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for every time I thought love meant sharing what wasn't mine." Her honesty cracked something open in me, but not the way she might have hoped. It wasn't a flood of forgiveness, more like a giraffe sneaking through a window you thought was sealed. Enough to remind me that healing was possible, but never automatic. We left a cafe together, stepping into the cool dusk. Streetlights blinked on, one by one, and the air smelled of damp concrete and blooming magnolias. The world felt raw, alive, like skin after a wound. We walked in silence, our shadows stretching long ahead of us. At a crosswalk, Nora reached out, not to grab my hand, but to let hers hover near, a quiet offering. I let the distance remain. "Selene," she said as the light turned green, "what do I have to do to make sure this isn't the end?" I answered, "Stop asking. Just show me, over time, in ways that matter." She nodded, though I could see the impatience twitch at the corner of her mouth. Time had never been her strong suit. At my building, we stopped. The tulips looked tired in her grasp, their petals loosening, ready to fall. She pressed them into my hand. "They won't last, but maybe they can remind you I tried." I held them, unsure whether to accept or to toss them into the nearest bin. But flowers, even wilted, still carried beauty. I brought them upstairs. Inside, the quiet was less heavy than before. I placed the tulips in the sink, filled a glass, and watched them lean, fragile but still alive. That's when I saw it. Tucked into the bottom of the bag, a folded slip of paper. It wasn't from Nora's handwriting. The ink was too angular, the strokes deliberate. My breath hitched as I unfolded it. Just one sentence. "Secrets never die, they just change hands." The paper smelled faintly of smoke, as if it had survived fire. My pulse quickened. I read it again, then a third time, until the words blurred. How had this note found its way into her bag? Who else knew enough to write this, to aim it at me? I pressed it flat on the counter, tulips nodding like tired witnesses beside it. The apartment, once a refuge, felt crowded with invisible eyes. For the first time, I realized maybe Nora wasn't the only one holding what was mine.
I couldn't sleep that night. The note sat on my nightstand, a silent presence more powerful than any alarm. I kept turning, listening to the refrigerator hum, to the cars hissing over wet pavement outside. But my mind circled back to those words. Secrets never die, they just change hands. It didn't feel like a threat. Not exactly. More like a reminder. A whisper from someone who wanted me to know I wasn't imagining the weight pressing on me. By 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep. I lit a candle, the vanilla scent filling the room, and pulled out the old shoebox where I kept fragments of my past. Photographs, letters, ticket stubs, all the things I had sworn to keep buried. My hands shook as I sifted through them. How many of these scraps could someone use to twist the story of my life? One picture caught me off guard. It was Nora and me, younger, laughing so hard that half my face blurred. Behind us, a boy leaned against the railing of a bridge, eyes sharp even through the grain of the film. Daniel, a name I hadn't thought of in years. We'd been 17, full of bravado and fragile hearts. Daniel had known things about me, about my family, that I never intended to share. He had once promised, "I'll never tell." But promises made in youth dissolved like chalk in rain. I set the photo aside, pulse quickening. Was he the one who wrote the note? Was this his way of reappearing, of reminding me that he'd been holding a piece of me all along? When dawn came, pale light brushing the walls, I made tea I couldn't taste and stared at my phone. Nora's messages waited. So did Mara's, my mother's, all tugging at me with their expectations. But it was Daniel's face, that half-smile frozen on paper, that haunted me. I slipped the note into my coat pocket and headed out. The morning air was damp, the city still stretching awake. My steps carried me without thought down streets that remembered me, even if I had tried to forget them. Past the bakery where Nora and I used to spend afternoons, past the mural that Daniel once swore he'd paint over but never did. I found myself at the bridge, from the photo. The railing was rusted now, the paint peeling in flakes that drifted into the river below. I ran my fingers over the cool metal, half expecting his voice to rise from the water. Instead, my phone buzzed. A new number. Still carrying it? Or ready to let go? My knees weakened. I looked around. Joggers passing, a woman with a stroller, 2 teenagers laughing as they crossed. Ordinary life. Utterly unaware that my past had just tapped me on the shoulder. The note in my pocket suddenly felt heavier, like it had absorbed every secret I thought I'd buried. My throat tightened. This wasn't just about Nora anymore. Someone else had stepped onto the stage. Someone who had been waiting, patient, watching. I leaned against the railing, my heart slamming. The river below glimmered with cruel serenity, like it knew what it held. For the first time in years, I whispered his name into the wind. Daniel.
The name hung in the air, carried away by the wind as though the river itself would keep my confession. I hadn't spoken it in years, but the moment I did, the past surged forward, uninvited. Memories of smoky rooftops, late-night promises, his laughter sharp as broken glass. They flooded me until I had to grip the railing for balance. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Meet me. Same cafe, noon. No signature, no need. I pressed the phone to my chest as if that would slow the wild thrum beneath my ribs. The cafe. Not just any cafe, but the one where I had spent countless afternoons with Nora, where time itself had once seemed to stop. Daniel choosing that place wasn't coincidence. It was a reminder that my history was layered, tangled, impossible to separate into neat lines. I walked home quickly, the city's rhythm deafening around me, crossing streets, dodging cyclists, nodding at shopkeepers, All of it blurred as my mind replayed that one question. Still carrying it or ready to let go? By the time I reached my apartment, the tulips had already bowed their heads in the glass, petals slipping silently to the counter. They looked defeated, fragile, like me. I wanted to toss them out, but something kept me from it. Even wilted, they were proof of an attempt. Clumsy, but sincere. I dressed without thought. Black jeans, a soft sweater, boots that made my steps sound firmer than I felt. I slipped the note back into my pocket and stood before the mirror. My reflection was a stranger. Hair slightly disheveled, eyes shadowed from sleeplessness, but jaw set. A woman on the verge of something she couldn't predict. At noon, the cafe door chimed as I entered. The familiar aroma of roasted beans and cinnamon wrapped around me, both comforting and suffocating. The place was busy. Laptops open, cups clinking, conversations rising and falling like waves. And yet, the moment I stepped inside, I felt him before I saw him. Daniel. He sat in the back as if he'd grown out of the shadows themselves. His hair was shorter now, streaked with gray at the temples, but his eyes, those hadn't changed. Still sharp, still dissecting the world in a glance. "Selene," he said when I approached. His voice was lower, rougher, but it curled around my name the same way it once had. I sat across from him, careful, my coat still on. "You could have just called." He smirked faintly. "Would you have come?" "Probably not." "Exactly." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You got my message." I placed the folded note between us. "What do you want, Daniel?" His gaze flicked to the paper, then back to me. "Not much. Just the truth." I laughed once, bitter. "Since when do you care about truth?" "Since I realized it's the only currency left between us." The noise of the cafe dimmed, as though the room bent around our conversation. My pulse roared in my ears. He looked older, yes, but not weaker. Time hadn't dulled him. It had carved him into something sharper, more deliberate. "Secrets never die," he repeated, almost gently. "They just change hands, and you've been carrying yours far too long." I met his gaze and felt the ground tilt beneath me. He wasn't threatening me, not exactly, but he knew. He had always known. And the worst part? A piece of me had always known he would come back.
Daniel's eyes didn't waver. They pinned me in place like I was still that 17-year-old girl with secrets spilling out of her sleeves. I wanted to look away, to shrink back into the noise of the cafe, but I forced myself to hold his stare. "You think you know everything," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I don't need to know everything," he replied calmly. "Just enough. Enough to remind you that you're not untouchable, that what we bury doesn't stay buried." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms, though inside my pulse ricocheted. "So this is what you came for? To rattle me? To prove you still exist?" He smirked faintly, shaking his head. "No, I came because you need me more than you realize." The words cut deeper than I expected. Anger rose first, quick and bright, but beneath it was something worse. The gnawing thought that he might be right. Because hadn't I spent weeks, months, pretending I was fine only to crumble when Nora slipped once? Hadn't I been aching for someone to say, "I see it too"? But Daniel was not the one I wanted it from. He never was. I stood, the chair scraped sharply against the floor. Heads turned, the spell of our little corner breaking. "You don't get to decide what I need. Not anymore." He watched me,
unreadable, then lifted his cup as if to toast. "We'll see." I walked out into the evening. The cold air hit my cheeks like water, and for the first time in days, I inhaled fully. The city roared around me, buses sighing, strangers laughing, neon lights flickering awake. I felt small, but not powerless. Just small in the way one person always is against the immensity of the world. Back in my apartment, the tulips had collapsed entirely. Petals scattered across the counter like confetti from a party long over. I let them be. I didn't need to clean up the evidence of endings right away. Endings have their own dignity, even in their mess. I picked up the note one last time. The paper smelled faintly of smoke still, as if it carried the echo of fire. My fingers traced the words, "Secrets never die. They just change hands." Maybe that was true. Maybe what mattered wasn't who carried them, but how. Maybe carrying meant surviving. I slipped the note back into the shoebox with the photographs and letters, tucked the lid on, and pushed it to the back of the closet. Not gone, but not ruling me either. When I lay down, exhaustion finally claimed me. For the first time in nights, I slept without jolting awake. And in that sleep, I dreamed not of Nora, not of Daniel, but of a faceless figure leaving something on my doorstep, a package I didn't open. Morning would come, and with it more choices. But tonight, the silence was mine. I had survived the breaking of trust, the unveiling of secrets, the return of ghosts. And though none of it was simple, none of it was clean, I knew one thing. I was still here, breathing, waiting, ready for whatever would come next. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like a secret myself.